still, I felt a strong desire to ask this last time, but I didn't. When Stephanie asked about gratitude, anytime you say that you can't do something, you're referring to authorship.
Of course.
Yeah. And it just so happened that at that time, I just feel it's so easy to, for many, especially for me, to take a statement such as, you can't produce gratitude, you can't do it, as in, there's no point in even attempting to try to do it. Which I know is not what you're talking about. And I've been having a strong experience of deliberate gratitude as of late.
So what makes it deliberate?
The intention of me first hearing someone saying that it's possible for gratitude to be a selected energy, and then to intend to feel grateful, and then for it to occur, not of my own authorship. However, with everything, not discounting everything else that preceded the occurrence, and seeing that I am much more grateful now doing this than I was before. And still noticing that it's ultimately not my author doing, even remembering to tell myself, I'm grateful for this. But still having extremely effective results for me, saying I am grateful for this. And I just know that if I heard you say that, even a year ago, I would be in such a fatalistic place where, so I just gotta wait till next time I'm grateful. And I don't want to go back there. I hope no one feels that way ever.
Well, I'm completely with you there. The fatalistic place is horrible, and I hope, my wish for anybody is that they don't get mired down in that, because I mean, fatalism is just another word for victimhood, and victimhood is as directly related to this contraction as an independent entity that everything is happening to, as the sense of authorship is the result of this contraction into the independent entity which considers itself powerful. So they both are products of the same contraction. So what we're pointing to in this teaching, of course, is the contracted state itself, rather than its symptoms, in such as fatalism and the sense of authorship. Now, the only value in the symptoms, when you're experiencing the fatalism or you're experiencing the sense of authorship, then this is like a red flag to look at the cause, perhaps. Say, okay, the symptom is here, let's see what the cause is. And often in looking at the cause, there is a seeing of that, and the seeing almost inevitably leads to an expansion, because the recognition in the seeing is that the contraction is false. So whether it's gratitude or kindness or open-heartedness and loving, all of which people have been exhorting you to be more of that for a long time. There's no shortage of exhortations to be kinder, be more open-hearted, be more loving, be more grateful, be more this, be more that. And if you can, by all means do. And if you can't, then the teaching is here to point to this awareness in which it is recognized that the reason you can't is because you are ultimately powerless. Inherently powerless. And that any power that you're given to do anything is given. And as soon as you see that, then the gratitude arises naturally. You're grateful that you're given the power. You're given the power to breathe. You're given the power to think. You're given the power to feel. You're given the power to do all these things that you're doing. And none of it is your authored doing. So gratitude is the most natural outcome of that recognition. So Nick says, I watched your video, Suffering Arises from Should, and heard you say, quote, you were doing it, but not authoring it. You were in fact seeing through, but you were not authoring the seeing through, unquote. This brought me to the question whether there is at all an author, or authoring, or authorship. Could you say something about that? Well, we can say that there is an author, but it's not you. It's one of the pointers. So that raises the question then, what is it that's authoring all this if you're not? If you're not authoring your moments of spacious awareness or your moments of gratitude, or you're not authoring anything that you do, then what is? And the teaching does not answer that question. So it simply points to the fact that you're not authoring, and then invites you to use your curiosity, if you can, to look into this question of what is authoring. And see where it takes you. What is your name?
Manning.
Manning?
Yep.
Hello, Manning.
Yeah. Hi.
Have we met before, Manning?
We haven't met before. Yeah.
So how is it that you find yourself here today, Manning?
I came across Ramesh's teachings, read some of his books. I'm in the process of actually just on the last few pages of your acceptance of what is book right now, in fact. And I live in Irvine, and so realized that you're just 40 miles away.
Right.
So I wanted to be in the space and kind of, I really enjoyed the book, and I love Ramesh's teachings. They really resonate with me. Very logical in many senses, and I'm an engineer. I'm director of engineering, so structure kind of resonates with me.
Right. And yet part of your nature is such that which is more expansive and inclusive and less structured resonates with you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you are the perfect candidate for Ramesh's teaching.
Yeah. I'd, about 8 years ago, I had thought I had cancer, and that wasn't true, but I thought, and I got anxiety attack, and just really threw me for, I've always been sort of quote unquote in control, right? Structured, and then that was, I felt an area that I had no control. Now I'm about to die and get sick, and that really struck me, and then for many months after that, and even after realizing it, it seemed like there was a post-traumatic stress disorder in the moment of the shock and the going into that scenario. And then after that, I just had anxiety all the time. So then that's what kind of triggered the seeking 8 years ago, sort of like to just shake that off and get the fear out and get the anxiety out. And so, then I started digging into all this positive thinking books. That didn't work. Right. Even, went back into the Catholic faith and religious. That went deep into that. That didn't work. And I stumbled across the Power of Now. And that was a shift because they had put my mind in a different place.
Right.
And then that started the spiritual seeking, I think, in that area. And read various books, I Am Dad, Ramana Maharshi, all the classic stuff through there. And so I would say I'm mostly grounded in the teachings of Ramesh, Eckhart, and Muji, I would say. That's kind of, the trio sort of is where my experience is at, I think, or understanding.
So has this exposure reduced your fear?
I would almost say completely, but there's stuff there to deal with, but it's a completely different space for me. Not many questions come up. It's just more of being. It's almost like music. When I want to be more surrounded with this than I am with. I have specific questions. I don't have questions like that. But I deal with what challenges me is in the work environment where it's very where you manage. I manage 10 projects, 17 engineers, and have a very dry sort of corporate environment, right? Which is like, do these projects, if you finished, and just, okay, we could lay off these people. And it's very kind of non-compassionate environment. So for me, that's the stuff that may keep me up at night. And how do I navigate through being the buffer between my engineers and keeping a workspace that is, compassionate and supportive and constructive and enjoyable. But also above me is the other pressures of, executives that are just very bottom line spreadsheet oriented, and that's the biggest kind of challenge in my life, kind of navigate that.
Well, I think you're not alone in that one. That's, and there are a lot of very expensive courses that you can take to help you resolve that one.
Yeah. So the reminder I keep bringing myself into it's a happening. It's whatever layoffs come or instructions from executives come. It's we're nobody's really in control here. This is how it's unfolding. No one's the author. I'm not the author to try to make something happen or not make something happen. Just so try to be in the space of just being the vessel for the flow of what naturally is unfolding. And,
right.
And when I feel like that I have to fix it, that I have to stop it, and then that's when the stress comes in.
Right. So you may have seen in, if you've been into my book, that I make a distinction between the doing and the authoring. And it is this which makes these questions even more difficult on one side, and yet potentially much more expansive on the other. And so when we say, I'm not responsible for something, that it's not up to me to fix the problem, that's both true and not true. It may well be your job to fix the problem, and that your locus in the whole matrix of things is to be the fixer of the problem. And that there are difficulties associated with that. There's uncertainties associated with that. There's all kinds of headaches or problems associated with being the one with that particular task, which leads to basically pain in life, discomfort, but that is different from suffering. And so we make the distinction between the pain that is associated with certain things and suffering, which is associated with this sense that I am ultimately the author of the solution. I don't know if you would run across that distinction.
Yep, absolutely. I love that distinction. And yes, no, I get that. It's in the integration of forgetting it in the moment, and then, oh, wait a minute, so when there is the suffering, when there's the discomfort, then there's the looking at where is that coming from, and then where am I authoring that? Am I, am I creating a story around that? Am I, so it's the more and more quicker gets caught.
Right. And again, in the subtle reaches of this investigation, the story itself is, quote, part of the story of everything. But the story in which you are the central character, the story in which you are the one that it all falls back on ultimately, that's the story that we look at in this teaching. So it's a very particular kind of story, once again, that brings the suffering. Not stories themselves. The stories are part of our awareness, part of our operation as human beings in the world. So there's a tendency in spiritual circles to kind of simplify these things, and so we cast out the story, say, okay, the story's the problem. We got to get rid of the story. So they're simply what is. Well, we got to get rid of, the me is the problem. We got to get rid of the me. So we simplify things, and in the attempt to find a way to be, that's very tempting. But unfortunately, it isn't ultimately very effective.
So it's a little tricky as an engineer, because like as a house builder, you are doing, there is a doing happening. Mm-hmm. It's not a you doing it, but there's a doing happening through the body mind, right? So
I'm comfortable saying it is you doing it, because it isn't. He's not doing it. Right. And that's why the distinction between the doing and the authoring is a useful possible distinction. So you are doing it, but you are not authoring the doing. And so the doing is going to be very much influenced by you and your nature and your characteristics and your qualities. So that same doing, that same building of the house will be completely different if you're doing it as an engineer and that little Miss Sunshine is doing it as a yoga teacher. You're going to be entirely different structures.
The Acceptance of What is your first book that I've read.
Was the first book that I wrote under my name.
Okay. And I noticed that there wasn't a lot of, the authorship wasn't in there yet.
I think that came later.
Okay.
Trying to think of it.
Is there a recommended next book to that that's a kind of follow-on to?
I don't know, you can ask other people their experiences on the different books.
Okay.
I kind of write them and forget about them, put them up on the shelf. And
okay.
Just buy them all.
Buy them all.
Narwhal says, cut to the chase. Who's authoring all this? Fred. Okay. Fred's doing it. Reminds me of a Gary Larson cartoon that I have up on my wall. I saw it in the newspaper and it was so perfect, and I wrote to Gary Larson. This was like back before he became ultra famous for the Far Side cartoons. And it's an image, and he was very kind to send me a copy of it. And it shows you're looking out the window, a guy from behind this guy who's bald-headed with glasses, and I used to wear glasses, and heavyset, who is looking from the second-story window down to the street, and on the street are a bunch of people with protest signs. and the signs say, "Down with Wayne. Wayne must go. No more Wayne." And the caption on the cartoon is, "The world needed a scapegoat. They found Wayne."
we're like waves of the ocean. Technically, we are the ocean. And it's like, you know, the great reality is deep within. So it's like, if like separation is not real, you said the contraction is false. So we say like we're not the author, but that's our false separate sense of self that's not the author. But the truth of what we are is the author.
You could say that.
Because like when I hear people say like there is a God and you're not it, like I always think
Yeah.
it seems to be
If you substitute author for God in that case, then it all makes sense. You're not the author. There is an author and you're not it.
mm-hmm.
Is what that's pointing to. But the question of what are you
right.
is what we're really looking at here. And that's what the seeking is about. The seeking is into what are you? Very simply. It gets really complicated. It gets really challenging and difficult and bizarre sometimes. But that's what it is. And so it's, Ramana Maharshi distilled it into who am I, or there's different ways of restating that, but it's all a question of what is it that you are?
Yeah, because it seems like if every time I say I can't or I can, I'm claiming some false sense of authorship. It seems like I'm reinforcing what I'm not.
Yes and no, because it depends what you mean by you can't or you can. And it comes back to the sense, really to the question of identity. Who can't or who can? You as Joanne. What are you? That's the question. I mean, Joanne obviously can do things and can't do other things. So to deny that is some crazy making. You go nuts to it. But the more deep and profound question is, what is this Joanne that can or can't do something? What is your essential nature? What are you?
Well, when you ask the question of, has this reduced your fear? I have a lot of fear. 27 years in to this. How come I'm the only one here who's crying?
I guess for the same reason you're the only one here who's wearing a heart necklace around their throat. Or, who has those earrings. Or is wearing that lipstick. Or, because you're you. That's why. And you are unique as Joanne. So this is Joanne's experience. And you can compare it to other people's experience, then you can measure it against other people's experience, and you can find somebody who, over here who you're vastly superior to, and you can find somebody over there that you're vastly inferior to. I mean, that's according to whatever standard you set up. That's all a distraction to the question of what is Joanne? And yes, okay, Joanne has these qualities. Joanne has this fear. That is part of who Joanne is today. But deeper than that, what the teaching is pointing you to look at is not the fear, figure out the fear, is figure out who this Joanne is, for whom the fear is a living reality. When I say figure it out, I'm not talking about intellectually, breaking it down. I'm talking about looking into it with all of your being, your emotional being, your intellectual being.
It's I've heard many times you said, like you'd say something to the effect of like these teachings. It's a sort of an invitation to look at what is, or what is happening. Yeah, I guess it's the looking, you know, that I'm looking at. Like, is that a pointer towards a very specific kind of?
No.
Just look in any way that you can.
Yeah.
Right.
No limitations. You're distracted by ants. You better
No, it was a spider.
Oh.
I wouldn't have squirmed about an ant.
Yeah.
Bigger.
The spider gets the ants though.
It's okay.
Not
It's
that
falling
one.
on me.
So I guess there's ants everywhere around there?
There are ants.
Okay.
Yeah, they ants.
Some benefits of being blind.
I don't see them either.
Oh, good.
They're just sugar ants though, right? They don't bite.
In this teaching, can you use awareness and consciousness interchangeably?
You can,
Uh-huh.
depending on the moment and what it is that's being pointed at.
Okay.
And when we are typing, then we have the advantage of capital letters to distinguish consciousness or awareness, capitals, as being synonymous with totality, unity, oneness, God, etc. And then with small, non-capitalized sense, then it is the experiential consciousness, the experiential awareness.
And would there be a subtle or gross difference between the two, or
Between consciousness and awareness?
yeah?
Only if there's some point that's trying to be
Okay.
made.
Okay.
I don't normally make a distinction. I don't
Okay.
think.
Okay.
I'm not aware that I normally make a distinction
Okay.
between awareness and consciousness.
Okay. So, Ramesh would talk about both the manifest. First of all, I kind of go back to something you said many, many years ago when, out of quoting Ramesh, all there is consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. And then if you really see that or understand it, then there's nothing more to talk about. But he would talk about both consciousness or awareness being both manifest and unmanifest. And exactly.
So that's the capital and the non-capital.
Okay. So that is it's non-temporal when he is pointing to that, correct? It is both temporal and non-temporal.
When it's right, so we can make the reason we use the same words
Yes.
is to point to the fact that it's both.
Okay.
We can then distinguish between the two, so that we can talk
Yes.
about a distinction by making one capital and the other not.
Okay. There's, just what's happening with me is just there's this fascination with awareness right now. So that's, I think it really started when I saw you over the summer. So that's kind of, what I'm sitting with right now. That's why the questions are there. Okay.
Well, and part of the reason that those things, awareness or consciousness, have, that they're used as pointers is for exactly that reason, that there is this continuity, a fluid kind of continuity between the two. They're not so clearly broken up between the manifest and the unmanifest. The manifest awareness or consciousness has the perfume of the unmanifest.
That's right.
Part of its nature is to contain that. And so that's why it's a very potent pointer.
Yeah, thank you.
It seems like, well, I'm kind of thinking about like two worlds or two ways of looking, or now as you know, I read a lot of I read a lot of scripture, and not just to quote scripture or whatever, because I think that, just intellectually, I mean, it's a very little value, but to have some experience, and it can kind of lead to some experience. So
Sure.
most recently, let's see, it was one of those sayings in a version of the Ashtavakra Gita that just rattled around in my brain for 30 years or something, and more recently it was sort of coming to light. It's just an enigmatic whatever statement. It's when the world arises, I alone am shining. I being, I suppose, Brahman. And then when the world arises in me, it is just an illusion. Silver and mother of pearl, a rope and a snake, water in the sun. So I guess I get some comfort, just, or another one would be like from the Gita being, he who sees everything in me and me in everything is never lost to me, and I'm never lost to him. He's dear to me. I mean, these are statements. So that is, that is seeing that flavor, I guess, or fragrance in the manifest. And there can be a comfort in that, and a satisfaction and fulfillment in that, and that I feel I am tasting that to some degree. And then when I look at the other world, I'm just full of frustration and desire, and I've got to play these games, and I've got to do this, that, and the other thing, and it just seems like a mess. And then, so I guess I would like to reconcile these more or something, or yeah.
It is where that awareness expands to include the difficulties of life.
Sure.
That's no. So it's not reconciling two divergent things, where you have the unity over there and the separation over here. It is very much.
Well, let us look at. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Let us look at this area of relationship or intimate relationship. You know what I'm saying? I mean. Okay, I mean, obviously, that one sees the divinity in, ideally, the divinity in everyone. They're Brahman, they're Atman, and yet, well, you have this, where you have a certain desire or aversion, and it's like, okay, and then I'm going to interact, I'm going to get some fulfillment, maybe, or disappointment, and I'm going to interact in a certain way. I mean, it's like, how does that cosmic vision, translate into, day-to-day human relationships, especially like intimate ones?
With pain, but without suffering. Because
Okay.
That's right. Because human relationships are fraught with pleasure and pain. They are. Life.
So if you're gonna play that quote game, then that's what you're up for. That's what you're signing up for.
As long as you're breathing, that's what you're up for. Pleasure and pain.
But there are those who kind of, I don't know, maybe they just sit in the cave all day, but who sort of in bliss all the time.
Perhaps, but we're
Yeah, we're not. That's
you're not him,
No, I'm not him. No, I'm not.
and so we're concerned with only with you. And,
Yes.
you know, whoever's off in a cave somewhere, they're off in the cave having whatever their experience is, which you don't know.
Right.
All you can know is your experience. So, what the teaching is pointing you back into that, focusing back on that. And when I say things like that, that as long as you are breathing, there will be pleasure and pain, is a pointer back into that. That's all. It's not the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It has the ring of truth. Certainly, you may connect to the truth that points to. There is something fundamental in our living experience that has its feet in both the pleasure and the pain. Those two things cannot be separated from each other.
Mm. Well, you gave the example once of, that obviously if it were up to you, you would not hurt people that you love, and yet you do. And
That's
you
right.
do things that, but I suppose you don't suffer about it because you feel that, obviously I did not intend this, I didn't have power over, doing this or not doing this, so I feel bad about it, but I don't know, I'm not suffering over it, or the same with pride about, it's an accomplishment.
Do you think it matters if people intend to or not intend to?
In the story of our lives, we attach significance to that, yes. But ultimately, even the intention and the connection of the intention to the outcome is not in any individual's control.
Because I have this thing I always say, like, assume positive intent. Like, I have this assumption that everyone's doing the best they can based on whatever's happening, and that if they had the ability to do it better or differently, they would be.
That's
and
right.
then other people would say, nope, there's narcissists, there's evil people, there's actually people that are intending and causing harm.
Yeah, well, that's why intention is such a messy term.
Mm-hmm.
The statement, everyone is doing the best they can, is not necessarily connected to intention.
Right.
I mean, that even if they're intending to do evil, that's the best they can.
Right, right.
So the statement that everyone is doing the best they can is simply a pointer to what is. So you have an intention. You say, I'm going to get that guy. I'm going to get that person. If they did me wrong, I'm going to get them. Your intention is to screw them over, to make them pay. Now, whether you, in fact, can do that or not is clearly not in your hands. Even though your intention may well be horribly evil. They may go completely unscathed. So what we're concerned with is what is it that is actually responsible for the happening? of the quote evil. Clearly, it's not your intention. Your intention doesn't make the evil happen. Something else is at play. And as Narwhal said, Fred is. Fred's responsible.
Or Wayne. Yeah,
Or Wayne, as the case may be, depending on the day. Yes.
So is it said that drawn on? Is it said that the unmanifested coexists with the manifested? Is that the point here?
Coexists.
So that there is this unmanifested that I suppose you can try to find or touch or something. That there is this unmanifested realm, if you will, even as there is this manifested realm.
I mean, in scriptures, I'm sure, I don't know anything about scriptures. let's cut to the chase. I have no clue about any of that. I'm just told.
I don't know that.
The way I talk about the unmanifest and the manifest is that the unmanifest is all there is. And so the manifest must be an aspect of all there is.
it's just, you know, it's, I don't know. You look into the experience of being aware, and you get all sorts of pointers of the unchanging nature of that, and then you perhaps get the experience of that, which I feel like I've had, where there's the experience of a formless, unchanging presence. So then I, at least now, start to wonder if somehow there's this coexistence happening. There seems to be a manifestation. There's a manifestation going on, yet there's a non-manifestation going on in this presence.
Well, the non-manifestation is not going on. The non-manifestation is all there is. It is the context itself for which all the going on happens. So they're not equivalent in that way. We're not talking about two equivalent things that coexist.
So the manifestation doesn't affect the unmanifestation, perhaps. Another way of talking about it. It simply is. And whether the manifestation is or isn't, that presence, if you will, is.
Yeah. The unmanifest is. Period. Period.
It doesn't lose anything by becoming manifest.
So the problem is always in talking about it that we objectify it.
But it's infinite.
But, quote, it is not an object.
So how can it be known if it's not an object?
Can't. It can only be known as it objectifies.
And how
The
do you
all
know?
knowing is at the level of subject-object relationship.
And how do you know it exists?
You don't. You have to take my word for it.
Very good, Eric.
Are you familiar with the concept of a wave function in quantum mechanics? Well, it has me thinking of this. It just got me thinking about it when you were talking about the consciousness or awareness of a capital A as opposed to a lowercase a, because it's tied into that experiment, Schrodinger's cat,
Mhm.
and double slit experiment. And it's postulated, I suppose, that the entire universe, until it's, perhaps we could say, until that smaller C consciousness comes into play, exists as one wave function. The wave function being exists as a non-material. All probabilities exist, all times happening simultaneously.
Mhm.
And then this observer, which perhaps we could call the lowercase c, comes in.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you have a linear universe.
Mhm.
That's so freaking hot.
Schrodinger's cat.
I love it. There's something in me that just does something. I don't know.
Yes. Another way of pointing to exactly the same.
Wayne. And there is something that happens here. I think, it's kind of beyond words. I think you refer to it as resonance. And yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, like, just my personal experience of it, things just seem to be, it's easier to relax. Things just flow a little bit better internally, I think. And then there's a half-life, like as soon as I walk out the door, to that flow, that relaxation. I guess the question ultimately is, like, how do I get, like, whatever the hell this is and bring it out, into life?
Move into an ashram. An age-old strategy for that. Monastery, ashram. Now, that's only partially effective because anybody who's spent a lot of time in monasteries and ashrams will tell you that there's all kinds of internal politics and bullshit that goes on.
Yeah.
And that once you get involved in that, then the problems you have in the world are the same problems that you're going to have in that society.
Yeah, when I was in India, I did spend a couple months in a monastery, and like, they can be just as fun and dramatic at a monastery as anywhere else. There's just like kind of a spiritual veneer to it.
Yes. So, but it's not just a veneer. So there is something inherently powerful in the resonance. But you can't manufacture it.
Yeah, I tried.
Of course. Of course you have. And now, as Adam pointed out, when you do certain things, you may find that for a while, or for perhaps for a long while, it brings certain results. So coming here, you may find for a while, or a very long while, brings a certain identifiable, practical result in your life where you experience this resonance and it has benefit for you say. Mm-hmm. And so you are drawn to continue to do that. So it isn't that there's nothing that can, quote, happen or be done. There's all kinds of things that can be done. But there's never, ever a guarantee that your desired outcome will come.
I think there's a belief that, with understanding comes, how do you say, just that natural, that resonance is kind of an indication of a deeper understanding. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but the understanding, the ultimate understanding, or whatever, the death of the sense of authorship, does not result in the kind of experience that you feel in the resonance, because the resonance is an experiential state. And therefore transitory.
Right.
Exactly. What we're pointing to is the ultimate understanding. The death of the sense of authorship is not an experiential state. And that's why there's nothing much to be said about it. Within that, a lot of the stuff that you're going to, you have to deal with walking out the door, quote, the sage deals with. Relationships with people and, stuff, that occupies your thoughts that'll come in, I gotta do this, and this person is being a jerk and needs, I don't want to deal I don't want to deal with that. But but they got my stuff, and I got to go get my stuff, and that's just like life stuff. And in this resonant space, all that recedes. There is presence. There is this unitive experience, which is wonderful. And it is healing in a way, and you are affected by it, and you do carry it out into your life, but you can't live in it. It's not, it's transitory, it comes and goes.
I woke up the other 2 or 3 days ago, and I had this sense of that there was going to be this doing happening through the day, but that I wouldn't be doing it. And there was a different quality to it than other feelings I've had when I woke up. I guess the thought occurred to me, but is that enough? Is that sufficient? To be a non-doer, to be a non-author of what happens, or because those were the words, or the concept that I put on it to describe it. And then, it did fade, but I don't know, I'm just recording that as an experience. And what seems to speak to what you're talking about, it wasn't the resonance. And when I think of resonance, I think of like transmission, or I think of a connection between two people, where two or more gather, where there is a sage and then there's a non-sage, and there's this sort of two tuning forks, but vibrating to the higher one in that case. But anyway, so I just report that happened, and I don't know what to make of it or what. Nothing. That's all.
Yes.
Refrigeration?
Yeah.
And do they have a place where you can cook something? Can you get something up also?
Yeah.
Okay. That helps me because next time I'm going to bring it.
Bring me.
Yes.
Don't bring me any meats.
And